Hey everyone, Cynics here. Today we're going to be diving into some more anatomy quick tips. We've done knees, we've done toes. It's time for us to take the next logical step and tackle shoulders. Once again, a brief disclaimer, these videos are meant to help you in forming sufficiently accurate anatomy from imagination. In respect to that, I do all of the art in these videos from imagination in the hopes that my personal observations will assist you in developing your own visual language. Sometimes my drawings of anatomy won't be entirely accurate, but I shall do my best. Okay, shoulders are definitely some of the most overtly unrestricted joints of the entire body. They can do almost anything, so it's going to be important that we understand the basic structure of things. In order to really grasp this topic, we will need a basic knowledge of the surrounding anatomy as well. So shoulder blades, pectorals, various back muscles, and upper arm muscles will all be super important in figuring out the shoulder. At its most basic, we can think of the shoulder as a little box on both sides at the top of the torso. I find it helpful to always extend this box in an angular fashion to include either the shoulder blade in back view or the pectoral muscle in front view. The arm can be represented as a tapering cylinder coming out of the bottom of this shoulder box. As we get more in depth, you'll probably want to start rendering the shoulder as a slightly more oblong, angular shape that angles inward slightly as you travel upward. The arm muscles become much more important with further detail. The bicep is extremely important to understand. We need to make sure that it gets tucked deep down inside the armpit. The triceps, those muscles on the back of your arm, are also important to understand as they get tucked under the other muscles as well, but they're not nearly as important as the bicep overall. From the front view, we'll want to use the shape of the clavicle, or collarbone, to help define the mass of the chest coming away from the shoulder toward the center line of the body. On the back view, we'll want to factor in the trapezius when we simplify the massing of forms. The trapezius is that muscle that sits on top of the torso connecting between the back of the neck and the shoulders. If you ever need to draw a big beefy guy, make sure to give him large and rounded traps. I'm drawing a rundown of basic muscle areas along the bottom. Hopefully a little bit of color coding helps make things more obvious. I'll also throw in a smidge of drop shadow just to help emphasize which muscles are on top of which. Now, if only people never moved their arms, drawing shoulders would be super easy. Although, I guess your lines would be pretty terrible if you had to draw without using your full arm. Anyway, let's start breaking down the movement of all of these structures. Luckily, we can lump the shoulder muscle and the pectoral muscle together into one moving shape. That will cut down on a little bit of the chaos. For the further sake of simplicity, let's inject a little bit of fat into the armpit itself. This lump of an armpit is of course only going to be visible when the arm is raised. It's going to be tucked away under the bicep muscle, but in front of the back arm muscles, which are in turn sitting in front of the back muscles and structure. Sounds a little confusing, but that's what the drawing is for. Just for the record, if you do have a chubby armpit, that could be an inflammation of the lymphatic system, which could indicate some sort of immune problem going on in your body. Don't freak out though, I'm not a real doctor, they took that license away years ago. Anyway, back to making some lovely color overlays. I made the colors get warmer as they go back through the layers. So we got yellow biceps, orange armpits, and red triceps, and I guess white back muscles, so well. If you're going for any sort of rugged look in the character, you can note that hair lives on the orange area. Looking at it now, I feel like this whole page is just a lovely diagram for how to use deodorant. I'm going to do a quick breakdown of the same thing for the back view. This time we get to conjoin the shoulder muscle with the shoulder blade and make a slightly more simplistic representation in our art. Make sure to observe that the shoulder blade is a moving and rotating surface. Don't just draw it the same regardless of what the arm is doing. Anytime you're drawing the back of a shoulder, there's going to be a little bit of a battle you're going to have to figure out. The battle between bone and muscle. If you're weak and skinny like me, then you don't have to worry too much. The shoulder blade will always win the battle of prominence. But if you actually have muscles, you might have to decide how much of the shoulder blade to show and how much of the muscle to show. There are a couple of times when this will become a lot easier. If you push your shoulders forward, you will see much more of the shoulder blade definition and not so much of the back muscle definition. Conversely, if you push your shoulders back, like someone with good posture, you will see much more muscle definition and much less of the shoulder blade. That should help your drawings a bit. I even made a handy little colorful diagram for you guys. Shoulders forward equals more bone, shoulders back equals more muscle. Great. Let's take a quick gander at some of the most common mistakes people make. Similar to most joints in the body, the most common mistake is people simply not drawing them with any mass or structure. It kind of looks similar to drawing a torso and then just gluing floppy little puppet arms to the sides where the shoulders should be. It's pretty dumb looking. At the very least, just put some type of little box to represent the shoulder. People also struggle with the raised arm position. Once again, they often disregard the mass of the shoulder. There should always be some form of structure coming off the sides of the torso. If you can make a straight line vertically from the sides of your body up to the tips of your fingers, that would look pretty incorrect. The other common mistakes all revolve around people just not knowing the surface order and connecting points of the muscles. I'm just going to try and make some stupid examples of how things could go wrong. What if someone put the bicep above the pectoral? Or perhaps the pectoral wraps around the side of the body? I don't know, I'm sure you guys can figure out your own creative ways to mess things up. The next topic is my favorite topic, reductions. This is what Anatomy Quick Tips is all about, being able to reduce complex forms into simple shape languages. I'll start with our fancy drawing of a back with a bunch of various muscles and details. As we move toward the right, we'll keep only the strongest creases in the forms and simplify everything into more angular and boxy shapes. Remember, boxes convey much more knowledge than circles do. Always simplify towards a box and not a circle. For me, the simpler it gets, the more it is like looking in a mirror. I'll keep it fast and just do a quick rundown of the front view as well. I've definitely been neglecting the side view though, so I'll run through some examples of varying reductions and simplifications. If we take our basic humanoid bean shape, it's useful to know that the most standard position for the shoulders would be towards the back of the form. We can always just throw in a box there and call it a day. When we get to the various 3/4 views, it's important to know that the forms of the shoulders and muscles will break the form of the torso much more dramatically when the shoulders or arms are pushed backward. If the shoulder is hanging down and forward, then everything rounds together much more into simple shapes. I think that's about it for all of the basic knowledge I can think of at this time. Let's have some fun with all of this information. I have a blank canvas here to fill with various sizes and shapes of shoulders. I'm going to think of as many different positions as I can from imagination. Luckily, I spend plenty of time going to figure drawing sessions, so my brain is filled with angles and directions for poses and anatomy. For all of this drawing, I'm using a basic lining brush with pressure sensitivity on size, and that's all. I love a good tapered line here and there, and mixing in a lot of T-lines also makes everything look extremely organic. You might even notice the subtle use of object placement to avoid showing any nipples. Always useful when making videos on YouTube. We'll do breast anatomy someday, but not today. The drawing in the top middle doesn't read too well, I think, but it's supposed to be the shoulder of a heavyset person as they stretch their arm across their body. I think I've also been neglecting the males on this canvas, so I'll try to throw in a few potentially male figures along the left side. The bottom one is even slightly muscular, so that's good. I think I'm reasonably satisfied with the drawings on this page, so I'm going to move ahead and try to paint these. As always, I like to fill the canvas with a desaturated and cool midtone. Blues and greens, things like that will give a nice complement to all of the warm, fleshy tones that will fill up the page. Step 1 is of course to paint under the line work and get all of the base colors filled in. As I started this, I realized it was going to be a lot of work to paint so many figures. Nonetheless, I tried to pick each skin tone uniquely so I won't just be relying on the same color range every time. Might as well get the most out of your painting practice. The trickier the better. Once the base colors are filled in, I can add a bit of hue variation and rough shading to some of these. A quick pass of some basic form definitions, and then I thought it would be fun to go crazy with a couple of the hues on some of them. Some overly strong hue variations on the top middle one can help inspire a more traditional oil painting look. I also just like to see how many different colors and crazy saturations I can squeeze into a skin tone. No one can accuse this one of being muddy, but speaking of muddy, you might notice the form directly to the right of the previous one is looking pretty dirty. You need to be extra careful with dark shadows. If they don't have the proper saturation and hue variety, they can go bad pretty fast. Everything from here on out is going to be painted on a layer above the line work. It can be a bit of a struggle to escape ugly color palettes when you have dark lines filling the page everywhere. As I was painting away on the bottom figure and already feeling a bit burnt out, I tried to think of some good ways to speed up the painting process. Since I'm using a brush which has built-in blending properties, I realized the value of getting rid of those black lines and replacing them with deeply saturated and strong colors. This way, when you pick up the surrounding paint, it will blend in a much more pleasant way instead of just darkening everything. Occasionally, you will see me use the digital airbrush to quickly highlight a cylindrical shape or add a bit of redness to a specific section of the body. This helps speed things up and also gives the main brush a couple more colors to blend around in a very fast way. I thought about trying some secondary lighting effects, but in the end, I just went with a very neutral lighting scheme. There's not many cast shadows or lighting effects. It's very boring in some ways, but it lets me focus squarely on turning forms and using good skin tones. Painting skin tones can be very daunting when you're doing it from imagination like this, but the more you do it, the more you can develop a system and visual language that works for you. For instance, thinking back on the video I did on painting darker skin tones, I can once again make sure I focus on environmental reflections and highlights in those palettes. The darker the skin tone, the more I'm bringing in the cool tones from the background as highlights. It's far from a perfect representation, but tricks like that will at least help out a lot. Out of all of these, I definitely think the drawing in the top left came out the best. The combination of soft edges and hard edges really helps capture the folds and forms of the back. It probably wouldn't be hard to pass that off as something based on realism instead of imagination. On almost every one of these figures, I traced the lines with a dark orange or reddish tone. I'm happy about that because it allowed even a minimal amount of effort to look much more finished at first glance. Alright, I think that's going to be it for this painting section. Now there's just one thing left to do. We've studied, we've drawn, we've painted. Now it's time to do some animating. There's definitely a lot of motions I could have animated in the shoulder, but I played it a bit safe and just did the standard arm raising and lowering. Of course, I made sure to throw in a little bit of a three-dimensional turn. That's the part that always requires the biggest mental workout. Rotating things in space is highly recommended for all of you that want to quickly improve your artistic ability. I've mentioned it before, but turning objects in space is probably the most valuable art skill. Anyway, here you can see the finished animation. I even used Photoshop to reverse it and make a nice little loop. Of course, none of these videos are complete without a little bit of silliness at the end. I don't even know what's going on here. Alright, I'm going to wrap this up, and I hope you learned something new about shoulders today. Best of luck on all of your drawing adventures, and I will be back with more anatomy quick tips in the future. Thanks for watching, and be sure to watch this channel for all sorts of other art content as well. As always, a big shout out to all of the patrons that support these videos via Patreon. The painting in this video was all done in Corel Painter. You can check out a trial in the description below. And I would also like to give a thank you to the nice people at 3D Total for sending me some awesome anatomical reference figures. If you want to improve your anatomy, they're pretty handy to have around. I'll post the link in the description. See ya, everyone.